Good afternoon. I would like to call to order the Cabarrus County Board of Commissioners work session for February the 3rd, 2014. For those of you in attendance, if you will, please, if you have a mobile device, please put it on silent or vibrate so that it does not go off during the meeting. Commissioners, you have in front of you the agenda. There are some changes that are included in the agenda. So at this time, I would accept a motion to approve the work session agenda, including the changes. Do I have a motion? I have a motion. Do I have a second? There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. First items that we have are discussion items that will not require, I'm sorry. Before we go into discussion items, we do have a couple folks here today that we would like to introduce and have come forward quickly. Patrick Coughlin is here and Margie Bukowski. We know Margie. Patrick, we're happy to welcome you to Cabarrus County as the new executive for the Chamber of Commerce. So welcome, and I'll turn the microphone over to you to
Thank you very much,
share with us
Madam Chair. Thank you.
I thought I would let Patrick do his own bio so that he's probably much better at it than I am, but we're very thrilled. Today's his first day, and he's had a whirlwind of a day, and so we're excited that he's here, and I'm sure that he has some things he'd like to say.
Well, I appreciate you adjusting your meeting schedule to allow a couple of minutes. Thank you so much for having me here. It has been a whirlwind of a day, but I do want it noted for the record that the first governmental meeting I chose to attend was the County Commissioners work session in Cabarrus County. Nobody comes before you. So I appreciate you taking some time today. It has been a great day. Spent a lot of time with the team at the Chamber, spent the past hour or so with Margie talking about some of the priorities and some of the needs, and we're just kind of taking it all in. I've reached out, I think, to all of you to spend some time with you in the next week or two as we start planning what we need to do as an organization so that we can make sure that we're meeting what your expectations are. And we understand that's kind of a moving target. Margie and I were talking earlier about the fact that how economic development is done and how chambers of commerce succeed today is much different than it was pre-recession. Your expectations as a funding entity have changed. Our members' expectations have changed. And so that's both the excitement and the challenge of running these organizations today. So I appreciate you taking some time over the next couple of days to speak with me one-on-one to kind of share what your thoughts and concerns are because they're going to play a very important role into where we go as an organization. This is the fourth Chamber of Commerce that I've had the honor of running. New York, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and now my second one in North Carolina. And I like being in the South a lot more than being up in the snow country of Pennsylvania and New York, let me tell you. But it's been interesting because every organization that I've run has been different because every community is unique. And so during the interview process, I've had the opportunity to meet some of you during the interview process. And, you know, the question was, so what are your ideas? And I didn't want to be vague, but the reality is I have some ideas, but I don't know what's going to work here until I get to know what the expectations are and who the players are and what the priorities for the community are. And that's what we'll be doing in the first several months here. But I will tell you that I'm a firm believer of living within your means. And one of the biggest challenges we're facing right now, both at the EDC and the Chamber, is taking a good hard look at our budget and making sure that it's going to be balanced, or preferably have a little surplus at the end of the year. Because my belief is revenue minus expenses equals your future. And if that revenue minus expenses is negative, you have a very negative outlook on the future. You've got something a little left over at the end of the year, you can build on that. You can look out to take a little bit of risk in the future. So we're going to live within our means, and we're going to try to deliver the most value that we possibly can. I don't know what that's going to look like yet, because we have yet to determine that. But I just appreciate you agreeing to spend some time with us, and thank you for letting me be here today.
Well, thank you. We do look forward to working with you and getting to know you more, and I'm sure the community is going to be excited to get to meet you, and so thank you very much for coming. You're always welcome at our meetings, work sessions and regular sessions. And,
Thank you, Madam
so I'm
Chair.
sure we will see a lot of you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you.
Great. And make sure you bring Margie with you when you come. We've gotten accustomed to her, too. Thank you both. Okay, Commissioners, Section 3, discussion items with no action. The first one that we have is Lynn Whitkey to give us an update on the QSCB projects for Cabarrus County Schools.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Good afternoon. It's always good to talk about progress, and we do have progress. We are really down to the very ends of our projects. The remaining projects are all basically in a phase where I would say outside of some limited amount of change order work, which was done in a couple of cases, the work is basically complete, and we'll be closing them out shortly. We've had settlement on the Central Cabarrus High School windows with the contractor. We've basically are working on the paperwork to close that project. With the gym addition at Northwest, there's some minor work. We have a final pay-up for the general contractor process, and then we also have a small change order that we had. I don't recall the exact amount. I want to say like $170 or so left on that project in an effort to spend it. We've decided, and we really needed to do this anyway, we are interconnecting the what they call the fire enunciation panels between both the main school building and the gym building. So it's a change order item that will cover the remainder of the work with our own funds, but we will spend down that remaining QSCB dollars. With the boiler replacement, that too is doing the same thing. We had some additional funds left in the project. I believe we spoke last month about purchasing an additional control panel with those dollars. That panel has been ordered, and we're just waiting for installation to be finalized, and then we'll pay that out and be complete. And the weight room addition at Concord High School, that too is basically 100% done. We chose, there was, I want to say about $4,500 remaining in that contract. We did not have a phone or data connection to the coach's office in the addition. And because of the way the rooms are arranged and used, to be able to go from one spot to the next, you'd have to be interfering with another class. So we decided to spend those dollars and bring in a data line and telephone to the coach's office and spend all those dollars down. So I'm very hopeful that in 30 days we'll be back here saying we're done, complete, everybody's paid, and we can all, rejoice that we had the QSCB money and that the projects have been fully completed.
Any questions? Nice that you're getting down towards the end of those.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Len, are you going to come back to speak about 4.8, the Royal Oaks?
Yeah, he'll come. We'll do that after, once we get through this section. Then he'll come back.
Thank you.
Next, we have Kasia. Continued discussion on the 2014 community survey.
Good afternoon, and thank you for letting me take a little bit more of your time to go over the community survey. The last time we discussed this was at the retreat a few weeks ago, and some of the questions that I heard from the commissioners were to look at the questions and really look at how the benefits are used in the survey and the relationship to no costs being mentioned. So I think you all have copies of the new survey, correct? Page 50? 51. Okay. So if you'll go to question 4. This question is new, and it asks the residents, the survey will go out to 1,200 residents in hopes to get 400 back. This is a quality of life question, and it's asking folks to indicate how important the following programs and services are to your perception of the overall quality of life in Cabarrus County. So then it lists a lot of the non-mandated programs we have in Cabarrus, and then you have 2 follow-up questions. The first is, which 5 of the items listed above should be the county's top strategic priorities over the next 5 to 10 years to preserve and/or enhance the overall quality of life? And then the second question, which of the 5 items listed above would you be most willing to pay more for to avoid reductions in service or decrease quality? And Jason, does that fall closer in line with what you?
It does, and I noticed one other area when you asked about the parks. You also said something about the adequacy of the parks, and I noticed that also, and I appreciate you doing that and including that language.
Yeah, the parks questions went more from, would you like more park facilities, to, do you feel your needs are being met through walking trails, parks, and also looking at the senior center facilities? And the transportation question was also clarified. And I did a little moving around because it can only be 7 pages, so I did some word magic on it.
The one, I appreciated your, I did notice the public transportation question was revised. The question I still don't think necessarily describes our CCTS perfect, because it says which provides rides with pickup locations, and our CCTS provides rides. I think the majority is pickup at your house as opposed to centralized pickup locations.
That would be the majority of the trips, but there are some designated stops as well. So,
I know.
okay. But yeah, the majority are.
But I think the majority is
Sure.
pickup at your house, and so I think that could better describe what that service is.
Certainly.
And the only other one that I was wondering about was at the very beginning, when we're doing overall ratings, I wonder if we could add a question on overall ratings, the tax rate and our debt, to get a feeling of what people's overall rating, their opinions of those two things.
Do you think question 2, letter E, the overall value that you receive for your county tax dollars and fees adequately?
I did notice that. I didn't have my microphone on before. I did notice that was in there. I don't think that addresses the debt at all, and I would like to get some idea of what people feel about the debt. I do see that question E in there, and that does. That probably addresses the tax issue acceptably. So if you could do something about the debt issue, that would be something I'd like to see.
My question about the debt would be how you would word that. Because if you ask me that question, the first thing I would say is, well, how much is it? When did you incur it? What did you spend it on? And those kind of things. I'm not sure how we inform people participating in the survey adequately to equip them to answer that question. Do you have thoughts on that?
That is a difficult situation to overcome. Looking at some Pew research that was done, of course, these are not surveys like this at all, but they would ask folks about their priorities. Where do you see your priorities? Or, how would you best describe debt situations? Are you comfortable with the debt? Rather than, do you want debt? Yes, no. How can we get rid of it? But they're very vague, as opposed to such a direct question. Is there any specific word? What kind of specific wording are you looking to?
Well, just incorporating your concept there, are you comfortable with the debt? Perhaps we could say the county owes $469 million in total debt. Are you comfortable with that amount of debt, or something to that effect?
How would you relate the service for what they've, rather than singling out the debt, how might you suggest showing what they receive for those services?
Well, the other, I was trying to incorporate the language that you had said, but one of the things that I think we could do is by the list of services, say, which of these services, or perhaps say the county owes $469 million in total debt, for which of these services would you be willing to add more debt?
And would you include the bond from the past, since they voted on the bond? Would you separate that out, or?
I would just say, I think it would start to get very confusing.
I agree.
We owe the money, that wherever it came from, that's what we owe, and so this is what we owe. What are you willing to add more debt to have, is basically the concept.
We can wordsmith it and shoot
Sure.
it back out to you guys and see what, if there's some language that we can all agree on this particular question. So we'll get it over the next couple of days and send it back out.
And on your park question, I have it on this one. Question 27. In the last year, how many times have you visited or used a public park?
Mm-hmm.
Should we limit that to Cabarrus County public parks?
Oh, we can certainly do that.
And question 26, just for the people at home, is where you did make that adjustment, and I think that's a great adjustment there. Thank you for doing that, Kasia.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Back to tweeting.
Okay. Next, we have Food Policy Council review. Aaron Newton is here.
Good afternoon, and happy to join you. I'm joined this afternoon by Aaron Baer, who's the Outreach Marketing Economic Development Chair of the Food Policy Council. I wanted to share with you all a little bit about the Food Policy Council's 2014 retreat and planning session, which was held on August 25th, which was a popular day for retreats. January, thank you. Which was a popular day for retreats. Happy to report that we had real successful participation. We had 4 council members who were not able to join us. 2 were sick and 2 were actively involved in food projects on that particular day. So I was proud and happy to see the level of participation we had in this half-day event, where the council got together to review past performance of their efforts in previous years, and also do some forecasting for the work that they wanted to do in 2014. So I invited Aaron here today to share more specifically about the council's efforts in 2014.
Sure. Thank you. Good afternoon, and thanks for allowing me to have a little bit of your time. So as Aaron mentioned, just a brief overview of the council initiatives for 2014 as determined by the council members, who, if I might add, really do spend a lot of time, of their own volunteer time, putting forth effort to ensure a sustainable local food system. So the priority areas, I know you've reviewed the summary report, but the priority areas are those of local foods in schools, long-term food insecurity planning for hunger relief, and looking at incentives for local businesses to support the locally grown campaign. So to elaborate on some of those, the food in school, so what the council really wants to do is to foster some of the efforts related to school gardens and to establish partnerships with businesses and other organizations that have that strong connection, and to make sure that those school garden efforts continue forward. As it relates to long-term food insecurity planning, really looking to contribute to hunger relief initiatives. There's a lot of short-term hunger relief initiatives locally, but helping to plan for long-term efforts. And one thing they really want to do is explore and research existing policies in other municipalities or other counties that could then be have a positive impact here locally in the future. Also looking for solutions related to food security, not just for those who are hungry, but looking for ways to ensure that our food system really can withstand possible interruptions in the food supply. So that particular group is working on those efforts, or will be working on those efforts in 2014. And last but not least, looking at incentives, and certainly not financial or tax-based incentives, but looking how we as Food Policy Council members can connect those growers with the producers or with the sellers, connecting, facilitating that collaboration. If you saw in the notes, we referred to it as speed dating. So really having that connection on both sides and making sure that the locally grown campaign initiative really moves forward here in Cabarrus County, so that we have the food being produced, but it's being sold in whether it's corner stores or restaurants, so having that connection being made. I believe pretty much sums it up. I don't know if you have any questions.
Does anybody have any questions? Thank you very much. I hope y'all had a good day.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioners, next we have discussion items for action at our regular meeting. And we'll ask Kelly Klutz and Lynn Whitkey to come back up. I think Dr. Louder is here. And Chief Deputy Hunt's going to join them.
Ran out of chairs. This is about school resource officers.
Okay, this is to talk about school resource officers.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your time. We're here to actually tell you we've secured some funds this time and not asking for 100% of the funds. The state had a grant available to school systems this year. It was a $7 million grant for all LEAs. We put our application in for the grant, not expecting to get it because we generally do not get grants. It's a 2-for-1. The state pays $2, locally pays $1, and we were awarded through the first and second rounds $368,000 of a state grant, which meant that we would match $130,000 of local, which means we now have $498,000 to go toward 9 resource officers, school resource officers. So that means for us, we will have 9 school resource officers in our elementary schools, and at a cost to us for $14,000, just over a little $14,000 at each. We would have one at every other school, or half at each elementary school. We've also applied for a 3rd round for the grant, and we're awaiting a decision on that. So we hope that we'll be able to say that we've gotten more resource officers. How many have we applied for on that grant?
9 more.
9 more. So we hope to bring that back to you. The reason we're here is the grant pays for the salary of the officer. It doesn't pay, we can't pay for staff development, we can't pay for vehicles. So there's some obligation of the county. Out of the 9 officers that we will need to employ or need to secure, 5 of them are Cabarrus County deputies, and 4 of them would be City of Concord police officers. So I'll take questions or concerns.
Do you know Mike, do you know what that means for us?
I think Chief Hunt's got those numbers of what the impact there. Chief, how do you?
Numbers right now.
What's that?
I don't have any numbers right now.
How do you propose to staff the 5 that we're going to be responsible for?
I think they were talking right now, because we wouldn't be able to hire someone quickly enough to finish the school year, was doing maybe some off-duty officers in those capacities and going to the schools and being paid that way. And then us trying to get positions maybe to start the new school year with those actual officers being full-time officers for the sheriff's office.
Have you decided which elementary schools that you will put the officers at of the other one, and will Royal Oaks be one of them?
To be honest with you, we left that to law enforcement. So in other words, they decide how to cover, and since we're doing that with 2 different agencies, but the answer is that's certainly something that we've taken into account. The ironic thing about Royal Oaks is it's in the city of Kannapolis, which they're the only school in Cabarrus County Schools that's actually covered for their DARE officer through Kannapolis Police Department. And so that was something that the sheriff had to work on, and he's worked on that. So they are one of the school. All the schools will be assigned a resource officer as far as how they cover them.
I was talking to a couple parents from Royal Oaks this weekend, and they had mentioned to me that they don't have any security cameras out there, and that was one thing I was going to ask Mr. Whitkey about under 4.8, but since we're talking about security here, do you know when they will get security cameras out? With the design of their school, of course, it's one of the oldest schools, probably the oldest elementary school that we have, but it's really completely incapable of providing security based on the layout of it. So do you have any idea about the security cameras and when those will go in?
We have a consultant working on the project right now. We hope to have it bid, or out to bid, I should say, towards the end of this month. It's a system that's typical of what we've used in the past, so we expect good bidding, and we would hope to get the cameras installed in a couple of months, as quickly as possible at this point.
Well, if you can get an officer to Royal Oaks as your every other officer, it does. One of the things that was difficult for them is the children have to go out of their building out to a, well, you know where they have to go out to the restroom, and so they're just outside a lot more than I think our students at some of our other elementary schools. So it does seem like the security at that school would benefit greatly from having one of your officers there.
Yeah, I went to Royal Oaks 1st through 4th grade, so I definitely know some of the challenges there. And I also, it's certainly something that has been discussed and the sheriff is very aware of and part of the plan on how to cover their school.
So are you saying that we have one resource officer for every 2 elementary schools? Is that correct?
Yeah, right now we have 19 elementary schools if you count Long Preschool and Mary Frances Wall, because they're not elementary schools, but they're kind of part of that.
Right.
So right now with the 9, we would have one for every other that they would cover. And then, as we said, we've actually applied for more that we'll find out at the end of the month. So the goal is to have one at every elementary school, depending on how that comes out.
Right. Okay. How about the middle school and the high schools? Is there one resource officer assigned to each?
Yeah, every middle and
Okay.
high school is assigned except for the early college, and that's because it's on the campus of Rowan Cabarrus, so that's their security.
Okay. And for Officer Hunt, they had mentioned vehicles for the officers. Is that, I know you said you don't have any numbers, but I mean, is that something that they'll have to be vehicle purchases, or?
Well, what we had talked about was maybe some of the vehicles, like if we get vehicles for the next year, be able to get some of the older vehicles instead of surplusing them out, maybe keeping those for these officers, because they're not going to put a whole lot of miles on them, and they're not going to be out, patrolling. It's mainly the vehicle helps as a deterrent at the school also.
Right.
Letting them know that there is an officer there. So it's something that we really have to have, but I think we can do it that way and it wouldn't cost us as much. And of course, they wouldn't have to be equipped with a radar and camera and stuff like that we have in a lot of our patrol cars.
Okay, great.
Well, I guess my only hesitation with it being on the agenda for this month is that this impacts our next budget year. And I think Ann has gone to try to get the numbers for us, but I'd like to know if we're committing to something that it has to be plugged into the budget, what it's going to be and how that's going to work. And am I correct that this is a 2-year grant?
It is a 2-year, but it's in the budget, so if it's taken away, the state has to go in and remove the funding. It's expected to be recurring, just like anything else that's in the budget, unless somebody removes it specifically from the budget.
Okay, that would be my other question, is that going forward, if it is taken out of the state's budget, then that would fall back on us to either pay completely to keep it going, or those people would not have positions anymore, or they would fit in somewhere else. So I just think those are details that we need to make sure that we understand. And I mean, if we leave it on for the February meeting, then I think I would feel better having it under, when we get to the meeting, when we get to the agenda, having it pulled off a consent so that we can make sure we have all the numbers and that we know what we're voting on. It might not be much, but if it were to be patrol cars or something, that could be expensive, and then all of a sudden, that's something else we're adding into the budget before we've done the budget process. So that's my point.
Do you know how many new patrol cars you're getting this year? Will you have enough to put old cars at these schools?
We should. We're usually on a replacement schedule. We replace approximately 10 vehicles a year. And instead of surplusing those 10, if we could hold 5 of those back and use those.
Okay, thank you.
Chief Hunt, is it possible that we could have deputies at the schools without having cars there also? I mean, they're not out patrolling in a vehicle when they're at the schools and things like that. So if they had a ruckus or something like that, that another deputy could come over and transport. So would that be a possibility as well if you didn't have all of the surplus vehicles?
That's a possibility. It's just, I mean, it's a lot better if they have a vehicle there and if they have somebody they have to deal with, be it a parent or, I mean, there's a lot of custody issues in the schools and things like that, or even somebody coming in maybe to do harm, if they can go ahead and get them in the car, because, I mean, where do you put them at while you're waiting on another car to get there? You know, the principal's office or somewhere like that, you could have more damage done there instead of, you know, go ahead and taking care of them, putting them in the car and bringing them on down to the jail.
Okay, I think Ann's gone to get some more information, so if she gets back, we can talk about that. I just would like to have numbers added to this before I commit to something. Okay. Any other questions on 4.1? Okay, let's skip to 4.8, because that's also Cabarrus County Schools, and they have a meeting today too, so we try to get you guys in and out. Request for Royal Oaks Elementary School roof project.
That's fine.
I can't remember the timeline. The commissioners allocated some one-time funds to us, approximately $1.6 million, probably December of 13.
Yes.
December of 13, anyway.
12.
12.
No, 12.
12.
I'm
Okay,
sorry.
you're
1
off,
year.
sorry. And at this time, we've completed most of those projects. They're 95, 98% complete. And we're at the point where we would like to make a request to use any remaining funds in that account for a roof replacement, a partial roof replacement at Royal Oaks Elementary, because we know that it is in dire need. There's not quite enough in the remaining funds to do that, but we had set aside from our fund balance an emergency allocation of funds, so certainly willing to use anything that we need to make up for that shortage. So we would use these one-time funds if you approved it, and I would take care of the rest for that that roof. The approximate cost of that roof is $225,000 as partial replacement. And there's approximately $194,000 left in the one-time funds available for allocation.
Questions or comments?
The $225,000 roof repairs, and was mentioned in our last discussion about security camera system for that school. Do you have any ballpark idea what kind of money you're talking about for that? And I'll tell you why I'm asking the question. I'm thinking this is a school that's high priority for replacement, and we're talking about spending significant dollars. And of course, I understand if the roof's leaking, we've got to take care of it until we can get it replaced. I just wondered if any of that, are there any more Band-Aids in your pocket that we can use to hopefully have these funds to apply to a replacement school, as opposed, you know, I know, I'm curious what your opinion of that is.
Mr. Morris, certainly that is a thought in everyone's mind, and I appreciate you bringing it up at this time. The cameras are budgeted at this time, and the nice thing about camera systems is the only thing you typically lose if you remove them excuse me, are the cabling system to them. You can take the controls, you can take the cameras, and you haven't lost that investment. So the majority of the money spent there will be used elsewhere, more than likely at the new school. The roof itself, this is a standalone building. It's not on the oldest part of the school. It's on the newest part of the school. It's about 20 years old. And we foresee the reuse of that building, whether it's used by the school district itself or by an entity, another government entity. We certainly see that as a viable facility for many years to come. So it's really just in the efforts of good stewardship that we would recommend replacing that roof at this time. And frankly, we've tried over the last 2 years, and I know they've been some of the wettest we've had, but it's been a struggle. We've patched and just been unable to keep folks completely dry in heavy rainstorms. And it's just to the point where we can't do anything else with it. It's a membrane that has run its race, so to speak. It's you see fiber up there when you walk on the roof. You don't see the matting on top of it. It's actually just literally being held together by Band-Aids at this time, so.
Well, you have addressed my concerns on both of those. It's going to be a building that we're going to continue to use in some capacity going forward, as opposed to tearing it down.
Absolutely.
And the camera being able to move those as well. So thank you for that information.
You're welcome.
When Chris and I had gone out to Royal Oaks, they showed us several classrooms where the tiles were just spray painted over and over and over again, so the roof is in very bad shape out there. So I'm glad to see some work going on out there. I think that'll make it at least usable until we can get them a new school and then make it a usable building. That's great.
What's the timeline for the roof?
Well, we've had an initial analysis done by the design firm, so I would think that we can get it bid certainly this spring. The big question is, it's an actively used building. We would hope to be able to begin the project during the school year. If we can't, we would certainly do the entire project this summer. So if we can get it started, during the session of school, we will. But it depends on how disruptive it is, and that's something that we'll discuss with the contractor. And, I will say, we had a lot of cooperation by our roofing contractors. They work second shifts rather, and they work over weekends sometimes to accommodate our needs. So if we can do that without jeopardizing the water tightness of the school, then we might consider that. Otherwise, we might just put it off until school ends and then do it this summer.
And the reason I was asking is these funds were allocated in December of 2012, so
Yes, ma'am.
By the end of August, which would be by the time school starts again, that'd be 20 months that the funds were out there to be used. And obviously, the point of funds is that they're used so
Yes,
that we
ma'am.
can go ahead and expend them and take care of projects that need to be taken care of. And I know there are a lot of things that you don't want to do until the summer, and then when you only have 2 months of summertime, it's hard to get a lot done because you only have so many employees of your own, and then, whether you sub them out or what you do. So I think that there needs to be a commitment that this project is closed out by the end of August so that that gives you the summer months and plenty of time to get it bid and get it started. If they don't start while the school's in session, I understand that, but June the 10th, as soon as the kids are gone, somebody should be up there on the 11th. I don't have a calendar in front of me to know what day, if that's a weekday or a weekend, but they should be up there pretty quickly and ready to go. It shouldn't take them 2 months to replace a roof, so
No.
I would think that can be done. And then that'll close out that whole fund, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, it
Okay.
will.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item we have is Jonathan is going to cover one-year lease of the former fairground property.
And I'm going to ask Cindy Minot to join me for this in case you have any questions of her. But to give you some background, the former fairground property, which the county still owns at the corner of Union Cemetery and Cabarrus Avenue, we have entered into some very short-term leases and had historically done that, I think, even prior to the county taking take ownership of the property, where the Ben Minot dealership had used that property for weekends or for events. They are requesting a lease for a longer period, in this case 10 months with some possible renewals for additional months at $1,500 per month. While they're doing some remodeling to their dealership. I noted in the agenda item we'd asked them for some additional information, which they provided. It really is more for their employee parking. We've had some other requests for leasing that property over the years, and we have not been able to do that because there's really no sanitary facilities. The difference here is, of course, that they have the water and sewer across the street and all the sanitary facilities. So they're able to meet those requirements with their existing dealership. And that's why we've entered in those or continued those short-term leases and would look favorably on this longer-term lease to help them during the remodeling period.
Actually, we've been thinking about it. We probably won't even have employees parking there. We'll probably just put excess inventory. The remodel is going to take a lot of our lot footage for the construction equipment and so forth. So we really just need to take excess new vehicle inventory over there, be parked nice and neat, keep it all up. I don't anticipate us even having an employee over there unless they wanted to get a vehicle and bring it back over to the main lot. So pretty simple usage.
Hey, Commissioners, any questions?
What did the county attorney think of it?
Well, I don't have an opinion on the business aspect of it, but I would just say that under the statutes that if you can lease county property if you pass a resolution that says that the county doesn't need it for the term of the lease. So we need a resolution to that effect. And if you go longer than a year, you have to go through a public notice requirement. But if you keep it to a year or less, then all you have to do is just pass the resolution and can authorize the county manager to enter into the lease.
Is there any liability to the county?
Well, in the terms of the lease, we would account for that and certainly do what we can through the language in the lease to minimize any county liability. Typically, that would be something that would be indemnified by the lessee. I mean, that would be the typical language you would see in a lease of that sort. And I would assume they have insurance to cover the risks that would accrue from the use of the property. We can take care of all that within the lease terms.
And we've actually had that in place for the short-term leases also. Mr. Harris has overseen that, and I guess if I get this right, lists us as an additional insured to handle that.
Well, otherwise it's going to sit there empty for a year, right? I just soon see them park cars on it that sit there empty.
We've had trouble getting DOT access to that corner, so you're exactly right. It just, if they're not using it, I don't know that anybody else has been using it, so. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I'm assuming that since you're going to be remodeling your facility while you're using this property, that means that you get to pay us more property taxes when you're finished, right?
That is correct. I hadn't actually thought about that, but yes.
Yeah, and the second thing is, I think we have some other parcels scattered about the county. If you would be interested in leasing some of those, we'd like to talk to you. Thank you.
I'll take that under consideration. Thank you.
It might not be quite as close as across the street, but you never can tell. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, next, EMS, co-location of a EMS station with the Harrisburg Fire Station 3.
This is an item that we had discussed when we first started looking at some of the one-time projects. Of course, we're also working on a co-location that you had funded with the City of Concord for a Weddington Road station, and we'll be co-locating there with an EMS station that can serve the Concord Mills area. But this is the new station that'll be constructed by the the town of Harrisburg at Pembroke and Rocky River Road. And the proposal here is again to co-locate with them in that station. Currently, these crews are at their station number 2, which is down near Robinson Church Road in Rocky River. That is a space that we lease some space from them inside, but it's a very small amount of space. Mr. Thompson can give you more details on that, but it looks like will not be available to us in the future as they begin to remodel that building.
Thank you for the opportunity to bring this before you tonight. In 2007, we noticed a trend of increased call volume and increasing response times to that segment of Harrisburg with new development, increased traffic. We identified that we needed to do something out there to provide the same services for that area that we're providing for the rest of the county. So this proposal does align with the Board of Commissioner goals to provide basically an equal level of public safety to the citizens of the community. What we did was in 2008, we went ahead and got into an agreement pretty quickly so we could provide those services. We put a temporary job trailer out on the site of Harrisburg Fire Station 2 with the understanding that we were going to go into the new Harrisburg Station 2 build out towards 485 that never materialized. We stayed in that job trailer for just a little over 2 years, complete with sandy cans to be pumped out and making ends meet so that we could provide the service in that area. Once that ability to stay in that job trailer ended, we were able to work with Harrisburg to get a small space within Station 2. 120 square foot is what we've been leasing for $1,000 a month since 2010. What's before us now is that Harrisburg is constructing Harrisburg Fire Station 3 down Rocky River Road back towards Pembroke. We have been offered space in that station, and what that will do is will get us out of that small area, enable us to continue to provide services in that area, And what we're proposing is something that we've done in the past with the city of Kannapolis. What we're planning on doing with the city of Concord is to pay a lease fee for a 50-year lease. That way we're able to stay in that area and continue to keep those call times down, those call volumes, address that call volume and address those response times.
You have information on the agenda item about the different motions that would be required with this item, because there is funding that it's not currently in the budget. There's a related budget amendment. You've got some information on the actual station and as far as how it hits the CIP. So, Commissioners, do anybody have any questions?
And this does
For
not
EMS
require,
director?
excuse me, ma'am, this does not require the addition of personnel. This is a move from a current location.
It does have a total cost. Pam, you want to chime in with $375,000?
Yeah, the third motion was to accept the related budget amendment if the current fund balance was available. And since we transferred all the current fund balance, we went back and researched, and there was some unexpended capital reserve money. So that budget revision has been done by Ms. Wilson to, if the board should choose to go ahead and fund this project, to use that money that's in the capital reserve fund versus the fund balance, because we transferred that money on Thursday.
Well, I mean, I'll say, I think that this is an important project for us to do. We've been talking about it for a good while. The expectation has been that it would be co-located there, so I would be in favor of us moving forward with the co-location. Anybody else want to say anything?
If we can get a space for $7,500 a year for the next 50 years, I think that makes a lot of sense. So I appreciate that you all have worked so hard to make these relationships and to make it work with the city fire departments. Thank you for doing that.
Okay, anything else? Okay. Thank you both very much.
Thank you for your time.
And we can update that language for the requested action for the regular meeting.
That would be great, thank you. Next, Kelly Sifford, request to submit weatherization application.
Afternoon. Each year, we are required to come before you and get permission to do the weatherization application. We don't actually have the application in hand yet. Each year, the time frame that they send it out and the time frame that they want it back gets smaller and smaller. So we have decided in the past couple of years just to come to you in February and be ready when the application comes out. Just to give you some information on the clients that we serve, the average income for this year, our clients, has decreased 15%. The average energy expenditure has increased 3%. The heating and air program, we are 100% owner-occupied on that. The average income is $13,744. The average monthly energy expenditure is $129. We've completed 15 units to date this year at an average cost of $3,772 per unit. The total number of people assisted is 20, 9 of which were elderly, 8 were disabled. With the weatherization program, we have completed 13 owner-occupied and 1 rental unit this year with an average income of $15,197. The total number of people assisted were 21, 10 elderly, 5 disabled. We have calculated that the average energy savings for clients weatherized in FY12 was $235 a year. These are one-time services. In essence, if they've been served since 1994, they can't be served again. So we have not done a revisit at all. I do want to mention that there's an interdependency of these programs. From a staffing perspective, the Housing and Home Improvement Program, which we use to do the wheelchair ramps and grab bars, and is specifically and fully tied to the elderly. We use these programs together to support the work that goes on, so they're very interdependent. So those are kind of some statistics and information about the programs at this time. Do you have any questions?
Commissioners, any questions?
What's the amount of this grant?
I don't know. It varies each year. This year, it was $239,886 for weatherization and $76,055 for HARP. I suspect that we will be looking more at like 13 numbers, 12, 13 numbers, which were $96,172 and $87,631, but we won't know those numbers. They're coming out later and later each year. I may not even know as late as June the exact numbers.
Is this a federal grant or a state grant?
These are federal grants. They're part of it's through the energy program and part of it's through Health and Human Services.
And the majority of it goes to the elderly?
Yes, sir. As I said.
Or handicapped?
Yes. As I said, with the HARP, out of the 20 assisted, 9 were elderly, 8 disabled. Out of weatherization, the 21 people assisted, 10 were elderly and 5 were disabled.
And none of them can have $100,000 in the bank, correct?
Well, we, for our purposes, do not check it, but I assure you that a good portion of ours, there's no way that they have that kind of money sitting in the bank.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I was just going to ask, is there anything tied to this? You know, if you do the work and then someone sells the house or they pass away and transfers ownership, what happens?
The only time that there's any specific ties in this program is a rental unit, and the landlord has to pay a portion, and he has to agree not to raise the rent based on the work that we did.
Okay.
Now, if he goes and does other work, you know, he can raise the rent based on the work that he did.
Right.
But to be quite frank, the average cost per unit has to be $6,000 or less.
Okay.
And so once in a while, you'll have a unit that if you have to do ceiling, sidewall, floor insulation, and the whole works, you know, you might get to $9,000 to $10,000, but that's a very rare event. Okay. Generally, most of these units are running $3,000 to $5,000.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
My only question was, on the home program, you said that to do that work out there, you had to bring the entire house up to code.
Correct.
Do we have any issues with it sounds like if it's $3,500 as opposed to $40,000 on the home, we're not having that issue on this program, is that right?
Right. With the weatherization program, you are tied specifically to items that they tell us that we can do. So we have a list of items that we can do. Outside of that, we can't touch it. Now, it is possible to have a health and safety item that we cannot address with those funds that causes the home to be deferred. In that case, we do try to find alternate sources to take care of the other problems so that we can weatherize them at some point. Some instances of that would be a leaking roof. We can't touch the roof with this funding. If they have mold, whatever that source is has to be taken care of, and the mold has to be cleared before we can get to it. If it's over a certain area, things like that. But yeah, the heating and air repair and replacement is a little different because you don't necessarily have to bring it to code, but it has to be inspected. So all that work is inspected. The ventilation that we do is inspected if it was not there prior to us coming before. If we just replace something that was already ventilated, then we don't have to get that inspected. But generally speaking, most of the weatherization work is not work that needs to be inspected or needs to be brought to code.
And did you say that the average income of the residents for which you helped under the first program was $13,000?
$13,744.
And that's mostly just elderly people on fixed income and disabled people on fixed incomes and things
Correct.
like that?
We actually calculated it out. For them to replace a heating and air system on their own, it would be 27% of their income for that entire year.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Dennis Testerman, Soil and Water Conservation District application. Commissioners, you'll find most of that information on page 65, towards the back of your agenda.
Good afternoon. I'm joined by Sarah Piper, our Resource Conservation Specialist, and Ned Hudson, who is our Secretary Treasurer for the Conservation District Board. The applicant was unable to be here this afternoon due to a scheduling conflict. This is request for authorization to pursue federal matching grant dollars for placement of a conservation easement on a portion of Porter Farms. We previously came before you and asked for permission to apply for state monies, and those have been secured. And we told you at that time that we would apply for matching funds, and so that's the purpose of our coming back. I don't believe I actually said in the budget or in the agenda item, but there are no county matching funds involved in this other than but funds that are budgeted each year for normal operating costs and that sort of thing. This would put a, if it goes through successfully, would put conservation easement on an additional, up to an additional 182 acres of the Porter Farm. We've got one that's in play right now that we hope to get closed out in the next several months. That would be for at least 54 acres. So this is a second easement on that farm. We're sort of doing it on the installment plan. You can't ask for enough money to do the whole farm at one time. So we're taking one step at a time, bite-sized pieces.
Okay. Commissioners, questions concerning this item? Okay.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, that's one of our major goals in our district is farmland preservation. So we look forward to carrying this through, and the more we can get, the better. And so we know Dennis here is really, it takes a lot of time and effort to get all this paperwork done, but apply for these grants. But he's done an outstanding job, and we hope things will work out.
If we don't take it, it'll probably go to the race.
Oh, it'll go somewhere else. Somebody get it.
I was actually expecting you to make part of our speech for us in terms of the cost of services, but since we've been talking about schools this afternoon already, if we keep the land preserved, the cost of services to the porters, they're probably getting somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 cents on the dollar for every tax dollar they pay. And for most of our residential property, by the time you add in school costs and law enforcement and all those other things, you're probably looking at somewhere $1.25 and up in the cost of services, which makes your job very difficult in that scenario.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Okay. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, the next item, we have Chief Deputy Hunt here, Tony Harris, Kyle Bilater to talk about lead shot extraction, screening, and soil reinstallation at the training and firing range.
Kyle, I think, can provide most of the details. Of course, Tony and Chief Hunt are here to answer questions also, but this is some remedial work that needs to be done at the sheriff's firing range. General Services has already undertaken quite a bit of work out there. I think some of you have seen that work, and if you haven't, then I'm sure they would love to give you a tour. But this is a range that's used for training, not just by our sheriff's office, but by other law enforcement agencies within the county and outside the county. It does, when they did some testing, Kyle can go into some of the details, but found that there's quite a bit of lead shot in the embankments behind the facility and needs to be removed. So I'll let him give you the details to that.
Well, rather than just reading through everything that's up there, which I'm sure you've already read, basically you've got enough shot in there where you have some ricochet effects when you do shoot, especially when they're in the 3 and 5 yard range. They get a lot of ricochet back, and the results actually trying to take the grab soil samples, I was the one that took them. There's so much shot in there, it cut my hands up pretty good. That's how much we've got in there. To my knowledge, at least in my 7 years here, we've never excavated and filtered out any of that shot. So I would assume since the actual commencement of that range, it's never been done. The range is being used more than it's ever been used before, primarily because there's not anything else in this location for any of law enforcement, or I believe even some military or SWAT.
There has been, yeah.
Yeah. There's nothing around for them to use. So it stays booked pretty much 95% of the time. We have been able to do some work out there, and this is another stage of that work. Basically, what you're looking at is bringing in a skid steer and an excavator and using a type of incline horizontal sifter, basically, for lack of a better way to say it, to get all the shot out of there, reclaim the shot in 55-gallon drums, which we would then take to our metal recycler. So they would maintain on site. We would use in-house soils along with what's sifted out of there to put it back on, and then go with a lime stabilization on top of that. Any other questions about the process?
I did want to add one thing. One of the reasons why we're bringing this to you now, well, obviously because it needs to be done, but it also is a very tight schedule there. They have, with all the training, and it gets even tighter as we get into the new budget year. So it's something that we need to fit within their schedule to meet, so they can still meet their training needs, but we can get this done. It does require a budget amendment, and this was proposed to, the money would come from the Commissioner's contingency funds.
Okay. Any questions?
And this is not that $5 million contingency fund that we have. This is a separate $1.2 million contingency fund that we have, right?
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, the next item, 4.7, you'll find at the back of your agenda, Commissioners, discussion of agenda items from our January 30th meeting.
And I believe you have a handout that looks like this. Okay. Things were going so fast the other night, I wanted to be sure that everybody knew where we stood at this point. To fill you in on the fund balance, the number from the audit has not changed. The next item, which is the, let's see, can you? Oh, okay. Well, the next item on your sheet shows the $9.8 million of fund balance that has been appropriated during the year. Now, what that includes is the first two reappropriations you made in September and August. And then we've made some appropriations from the APFO funds based on some settlement there. And then there was $491,680 that were appropriated at various times during the year. If you'll recall, we had $20,000 for matching funds for a fountain, $180,840 for that Northwoods contract for child welfare for their software, $265,000 for the turf fields, and $25,840 for a generator over at Kannapolis City Schools. So that adds up to $491,680. So those are the items that's in the $9,870,375. The items for inventories and prepaids and reserved by state statute have not changed. That does leave us with the $5 million in assigned for extraordinary circumstances. The pending and potential claims is now down to $2,880,335. The tax appeals is $4.4 million. The landfill closure is $300,000. We've got the amount assigned for working capital, the 15% of roughly $32 million. And that left the balance of the $29,486,500 that you transferred on Thursday. So does that seem correct to everybody? Okay.
So the $491,000 that we had to, where did you take it?
I had to take it out of the pending and potential claims.
Okay.
So we got going so fast, I thought you might do the school salaries one night, and then I would have this ready for Monday night, but it got going fast. On the back, I think it's, as he noted earlier, it's good to know where do we stand with our contingency. And the original balance before the meeting last week was $1,204,000. You just had the item about the firing range for $59,569. The next item relates to the school salary increases that I believe were approved Thursday for 1% for staff earning less than $70,000. And when I took the CCS amount, gave Kannapolis their pro-rata share, that's $838,408. So now the balance remaining in your contingency is $306,051.
And on Thursday evening, when you approved the salaries, you did not approve funding for those salaries. So there also is a budget revision that Ms. Wilson has prepared for the $838,000 that would need to be approved, and we would like for you to approve it tonight since we have to give it to the schools. So if we could go through that process, that would be appreciated.
Yep, approve the budget amendment coming from contingency. Any questions?
Okay, so the one that you want to approve tonight, you want us to suspend the rules, is that 838,408? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And Ms. Wilson will get the individual line items when the schools can give them to her, because there's a multitude of places where those salaries go, but they're going to have to take their figures and break it down and put them in there. So she's got a generic line item for them
Right.
until the detail is received.
I'm just giving you the total for KCS and the total for CCS of the 838.
Did they provide those numbers?
Yes, they did. We went with CCS's number and then made KCS match the prorated share.
So they're getting about $30,000 less than what they requested,
Okay.
based on how we have to split it from ADM formula.
Okay. Any other questions, Commissioners? Okay, well, we've been asked to suspend our rules and to go ahead and act on this item 4.7. Do I have a motion to suspend the rules? Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of suspending the rules, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Okay, I can vote on this because it's not the approval. This is just the budget, right, Rich? Yes, okay. Just want to make, before I voted something, I thought I'd better make sure. Okay, so at this time, accept a motion to approve the budget amendment for the 1% salary increase for school staff earning less than $70,000.
So move.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second, and I have a comment before we vote. It was said in the newspaper that we did not have the money to pay for this, that we had given all that money away. And I want to make sure that the public knows that we have had this budget contingency all year long, and it has been 1.2 million. So this has existed the whole time in addition to all the money that we saved. And all that it took was a budget amendment to pay for that salary. We did not give away all of the money to pay for this raise, as was said in the newspaper.
Well, I think what she indicated in the newspaper was based on our comments that the available transfer to capital reserve is where that had gone. So I think that was, I mean, it's
I think
perfectly
there was a
fine to
quote given on
clarify.
Friday. Actually,
But-
a statement was made that last night we gave away all the money that would pay for these salaries, and that's clearly not the case.
Of the money that moved to capital reserve, I think that's what that tied that into. So we do have a motion. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Okay. I'd like to go back just for a second to, well, okay, let's look at the regular meeting agenda. My comments are still the same. Under F1, which is the school resource officers, I would like to move that to G2. We do not have the budget amount. And that's up to you if you want to move it or not. If you don't want to move it, it can stay there. I would ask to pull it off, though, at that time. Other than that, I don't think that there was anything else. The rest of that should be the same, should be okay, unless anybody has any other comments. Okay. Move it to G2. Yeah, F1 would become G2. I think we should go ahead and do the public hearing because we'd already set that before and then put that right afterwards. So, okay. If there's no comments about that, I would accept a motion to approve the regular meeting agenda with the change.
So move.
Motion is second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I also want to make a comment along that same lines. I have asked a few times to get quarterly reports from the Sheriff's Department. When the jail was, when the detention center was being built, those commissioners, not me, got reports outlining the number of people that were on mats on the floor and everything else to highlight the need for the facility. I think the need was proven, and I don't want details that are onerous to the sheriff to provide, but I do think it would be helpful to get quarterly reports of average number of inmates there. I don't have any problem with the schools getting the grant for the resource officers. However, I would have preferred to get all the, which I've asked for now, all the numbers if that's going to impact our budget. I'd rather have that in advance and not after we've approved it. Kind of goes along with everything else that's been said. So that would be I just want to make that comment publicly. I have asked the county manager to request quarterly report, and I don't mean a report of sitting in front of us and making a presentation. I mean in our packet that we can look over and have some idea of what's going on in some general terms. How many deputies there are, if there's turnover. I don't know I don't really know what to ask for in there. I would just like to have some better understanding of what's going on in that department that we fund. Okay? Commissioners, good news, we do not need a closed session tonight. So if there's nothing else to come before the board, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
I would like to make one general comment. I would like a clarification from the manager in terms of what the 15% reserve policy is specifically for, because it's been talked about as though that is 100% to sit there for purposes of the bond rating. But when I look in our budget, it says these funds will be used to avoid cash flow interruptions, generate interest income, and eliminate the need for short-term borrowing, assist in maintaining an investment-grade bond rating, and sustain operations during unanticipated emergencies and disasters. And so if that is, I just want to make sure we're not being duplicative in terms of setting aside all these pots of money and things like that. So I don't know if tonight's the right arena for it.
I can answer that, and then I'll have Ms. Dubois add to it if she needs to. The 15%, again, typically the practice is recommended by the state of 8%. However, a county our size is recommended, and help me with the agency.
It's in the 20% range for a county our size.
So our board, instead of going to 20%, we felt as a staff that we were comfortable for cash flow and for those other reasons that 15% would be suitable. So it is there for all of those reasons. And one of the things that the rating companies do look at is your financial plan. And do you adhere to that plan, or do you not adhere to it? So if you were getting to the point where you're going to dip down into that 15%, which is your policy, then that has a negative impact on any kind of rating or their evaluation. So all of those that you see in the book are reasons to have that 15%. And again, whatever your plan is, they're looking at to make sure that you can pay your bills, and then also that you're not dipping into that, you're still keeping that safe cushion that you need to pay your bills throughout the year. Again, the reason for it is, and we're pretty lucky, we have a great tax collection department, but some counties, they don't typically get all their revenues when they need them, and therefore they have problems. We do for the most part, but that's considering this 15% that we can. Again, if all of our revenues are not here, then we've still got to pay our bills. The bills keep coming, so we've got to keep paying the bills, and then the revenues come in to make up for it. So did that answer your question?
It does, and
Okay.
I'm not advocating going below that. I just really felt like that it was that was talked about in a different way, or my understanding of it from being on this board was talked about in a different way slightly than what's reflected in our budget. So I wanted to make sure. So, for instance, it says eliminate the need for short-term borrowing. So if you had $1 million expense came up, and you went below, if you went from $32 to $31 million, that would be one of the purposes. Instead of going out and borrowing $1 million, that would be one of the purposes identified here. Would that have a negative impact on our bond rating to do something like that?
I'll let Pam answer that one there. So.
I believe the terminology to eliminate short-term borrowing is if you don't have enough money for cash flow, we as a government have the abilities to go borrow money to pay our bills until our tax money gets here. That is my understanding of why that language is in there. We don't do that, but that's an option for you to go borrow money until your tax revenues actually get in. If you were to watch our cash balances, you would see around June would be at a certain level, and then it'll start to decline from June, July, August, September, October. It'll start to pick up again November, December, January, it'll skyrocket because most of the taxes have been paid. And then starting about March, April, you'll start to see debt service and you'll start to see the decline again. So that's kind of our cyclical cycle of how our cash goes. Because we do not appropriate that 15%, we are not expending it, but yet we are still using that cash. That number, if you were to calculate that cash, that number would potentially go down below that $31 million. But we replenish it by the time we come back around in our cash cycle, but we're not expending it at the end of the fiscal year. So it's just kind of following our cash flow cycle. And when the School of Government and the LGC came out with those numbers and said, based on the size of our county and our budget, that we should be at 20%, we went back and did a calculation, and we felt that 20% was too high based on the way our cash flow works. I mean, maybe statistically, if you put us all in the pot together, that would be the average that was needed. But we were able to prove to the rating agencies that 15% was adequate for us, and they accepted us deviating from what the recommendation from the state was. Because we felt like if we left that extra 5% out there, it would be just sitting out there for it. We didn't need it. So that's why we adjusted down from what the state recommendation was. But we are above what their administrative recommendation is at 8%. So we felt like 15 was our happy home, for lack of a better term. But, you know, like I said, the state recommended, you know, the 20% based on our size, but it's just not what we adequately needed.
Yeah, and that makes total sense. I appreciate the explanation. I really, being here for, you know, a short period of time, I really wanted to understand that plan a little better. And like I said, I wasn't advocating any change to it. I have heard you say that changing your policy impacts our bond rating. So over the past 5 years, with our waiver of the capital reserve policy with respect to the surplus, will that waiver of our policy, will that impact our bond rating at all?
Actually, they were impressed with the fact that we were preparing ourselves for the storm of the rough economy, and they were aware that we waived the policy for the specific reason that we did. So we presented, we were upfront and honest with them and told them what we did, and for counties around North Carolina and other organizations, we were prepared and very grateful and thankful that we didn't have to dip into it, where a lot of our fellow counties actually did have to go into their fund balance just to make their budgets balance. So we were very grateful that we did not have to do that, but we were very upfront with the fact that we did it and why we did it. And they were accepted of that. So we've not hidden that from them. We have disclosed that every time we've had a debt issue or a refunding.
And I wasn't suggesting that we had hid it from them. It's right in our budget, and we say it over and over again. So there's no element of deception. I was just curious about it. Thank you.
Yeah, we'd just like to disclose that, so be upfront and clear to everybody that this is what we're doing. So
it's been well disclosed.
Hey, so
I guess to expand on that, had we not adopted that policy, that you said they were complimentary of us for doing it, and if we had transferred those funds each year into our capital reserve account and then got caught short on our cash flow, then we would have had to dip into the reserve, which would have taken us below the 15%, very possibly, and there would have been implications to us as far as bond rating, debt expense, if we had to do any short-term or long-term borrowing, then that would have cost us more money. Is that right?
There definitely would have been conversations about it. How they would have responded, I do not know, but there would definitely have been conversations of why we did what we did. Mm-hmm. But with the crisis of 2008 and the economic conditions, whether we would have been penalized, that I don't know. The one time that they gave us a negative outlook, and it was Moody's, it revolved around us actually continually spending our fund balance down. We did not have a 15% policy at that point in time.
Right.
We were just spending down our fund balance. We were constantly taking a budget and putting one-time money against reoccurring expenditures, which is the birth of why we went to the 15%, was to stop that portion. So I can't guarantee you that they would do anything, but there would definitely be a conversation about it.
Right. Thank you.
Mike, just so you know, I think that was the right thing to do in terms of the last 5 years. I just wanted to get a better idea of what these policies were and things like that. We've come out of that economy. We're in a different economy now, and so I just wanted to get a grasp of what those things were. I think that was the appropriate thing to do back then, and we're in a different economy today, so that, we're thankful for that.
How many years has that been county policy?
15%?
Yeah.
Hi.
I can get you that answer in an email tomorrow, okay?
Yeah, we'll shoot that to you.
No, I think it's a good policy. I don't want to see us change it.
And on that note, I will say that we do have the best county staff of any county in the state of North Carolina, because they work full-time and we work part-time, and they work very hard, no matter what we do, to make sure that we are doing things correctly. So I want to say thank you to Pam, Mike, thank Megan, Ann, and everybody else that's here. All of you guys, you do work hard for us, and we all do appreciate it.
Ms. Poole?
You spend a lot of time on those things. Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Oakstreich shared his budget with me, and it was adopted on June 14th of 2005.
And please, I was not talking about a new economy, so changing the 15%. I was talking about the new economy, so we can go back to our policy of allocating the surplus. That's what I was talking about, Larry.
Which they were already preparing some budget amendments for us before we went so fast last week. And that's why they were talking about it today, because we went a little bit faster than they were intending us to go. So, again, it is now time for us to adjourn. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Motion is second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. If you don't, then you get to go home, or you get to stay here and the rest of us go home. Thank you all very much. We've set a new record. Good night.